All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a look at the story behind A New Kind of Science.
Oh yeah, this one's gonna be good.
It's a book that caused quite a stir, and we're lucky enough to have Stephen Wolfram's own account of how it all came together.
Yeah, over a decade of work went into this thing.
It's wild. We're talking about the guy behind Mathematica and Wolfram Alpha, dedicating years of his life to this project.
Definitely makes you wonder what he was thinking.
Well, we're going to find out because we're going through the whole thing.
Looking forward to it.
We'll uncover why he decided to ditch the whole popular science approach, his obsession with getting the visuals just right.
Oh, and don't forget the crazy journey of self-publishing a book as dense and complex as this one.
Oh yeah, we're not going to skip over that. Buckle up, because this is one wild ride.
So where do we even begin with something this massive?
Well, believe it or not, it all started back in late 1989 with a pretty simple idea.
Oh, really?
Wolfram just wanted to summarize his work on complexity from the 80s.
Makes sense.
He initially planned for a 10-chapter book, focusing on things like fractals and chaos.
10 chapters for all of that.
I know, right? And cellular automata, too. And
Hmm.
that's where things start to get interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
You see, Wolfram wasn't your typical academic locked away in an ivory tower.
What do you mean?
He actually went out and did bookstore surveys.
Bookstore surveys. What for?
To understand the market for popular science books, he wanted to see what people were actually buying.
I've never heard of a scientist doing that before.
And you know what he found?
What's that?
The publishing industry was basically operating on gut feeling.
Seriously. No data or anything.
No real data-driven approach at all.
That's wild, especially for someone like Wolfram.
Exactly. So, armed with his bookstore intel, he made a decision that would shape the whole project.
What did he decide?
He ditched the popular science approach.
Just like that.
Yeah, he wanted to present the science directly, visually, and without dumbing it down.
Makes sense, considering his background.
Right. He wasn't interested in sensationalizing anything. He just wanted to lay it all out there.
So no simplifying things for a general audience?
Nope, this wasn't going to be your typical textbook.
Bold move, I have to say.
It really was, and it takes us to the next phase where things start to get really interesting.
Okay, what happened next?
It's mid-1991. Wolfram has transitioned to being a remote CEO.
Working from home. Yeah.
And he's moved to the hills near San Francisco
Sounds peaceful.
to really focus on writing the book.
So he's going all in on this project.
Absolutely. But this wasn't just about putting words on a page. He was using his tech background to build tools within Mathematica
Oh, so he's coding too.
to help him visualize and study cellular automata.
Using his own software? Smart.
And he was really excited about using notebooks for this.
Notebooks, you mean like digital ones?
Yeah, technology he actually helped to develop.
Of course he did.
He even switched from Sun workstations to Nextd computers just for better notebook functionality.
Wow, that's dedication.
You can really see how much he believed in the power of these tools.
And it wasn't just cellular automata either, right?
You're right. He started exploring other computational systems too.
Like what?
Things like mobile automata, Turing machines, tag systems.
Wow, getting pretty deep into computer science there.
And this is where it gets really interesting. One afternoon, during a walk, Wolfram had a breakthrough.
A eureka moment.
You could call it that. He formulated the principle of computational equivalence.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly?
It's a bit complex, but essentially it argues that lots of different systems, even simple ones, have the same fundamental computational capabilities.
So a unifying concept across different areas of computation.
Exactly. And this was a huge deal for Wolfram. It really started to shape his thinking about the whole project.
And probably expanded the scope of the book way beyond those initial 10 chapters.
You got it. But now he had a new challenge.
What's that?
How to visually represent all of this complexity in a way that was clear and engaging.
That's a tough one, especially for a topic like this.
And this is where direct diagramming comes in.
Direct diagramming. Never heard of it.
It was Wolfram's solution to the dense, formula-heavy style of most scientific books.
So he wanted something more visual.
Exactly. He wanted the visuals to speak for themselves, to make the science accessible to a wider audience.
So instead of complicated diagrams with a million labels.
Right. He went for a more intuitive approach.
Interesting.
But this created a new design challenge because he also wanted to include in-depth explanations.
Yeah, how do you balance those long blocks of text with all those visuals?
It was a puzzle. He spent hours experimenting with different layouts, meticulously adjusting everything.
He was really hands-on with the design, huh?
Oh, absolutely. He even refused to use hyphenation.
No hyphens, really?
He'd rather reword a sentence or tweak the letter spacing then break a word across lines.
Wow, that's dedication to aesthetics.
And speaking of visuals, this quest for perfection takes us to one of the most entertaining parts of the story, the photographs.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about those.
Wolfram wanted to use real-world examples to illustrate the ideas of complexity and simplicity.
Makes sense.
But remember, this was pre-internet.
So no Google image search.
Exactly. He had to get creative.
What did he do?
He went on a DIY photography adventure. Trips to the zoo, the grocery store, even a cross-continental leaf-gathering expedition.
Wait, what? A leaf-gathering expedition?
I'm serious. He was that dedicated to finding the perfect images.
That's incredible. I can't even imagine.
Picture him at the zoo, meticulously photographing both sides of a giraffe's pattern.
That's a funny image.
Or going to the grocery store just to buy cabbage and broccoli for their shapes.
He was messing around.
And he didn't just focus on complexity, he also needed examples of simple forms.
Right, like what?
So he photographed things like bolts, scissors, everyday objects.
It's amazing how the simplest things can have such deep scientific connections.
It really is. And speaking of connections, while he was on this photography quest, another crucial element was taking shape.
The title. Ah, yes, the title of the book.
You'd think something like The Science of Complexity would be an easy choice.
Makes sense.
But it wasn't that simple.
What happened?
Wolfram went through a whole evolution of titles, each reflecting a different stage in his thinking.
So he was really wrestling with how to encapsulate the whole thing.
And absolutely, he even considered titles like Algorithms in Nature or An Introduction to Complexity.
Those do sound a bit, well, academic.
He actually said that people found some of his early titles too complicated.
That's funny, a book about complexity being too complex.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it led to a crucial realization.
What was that?
He needed a title that was both accurate and engaging.
So it had to capture the essence of the book without being intimidating.
Exactly. And that's when the phrase, a new kind of science, emerged.
From where?
His own flap copy. It was like a light bulb moment.
Perfect. It's bold, intriguing, and gets right to the point.
And it really captured the book's break from traditional scientific approaches.
It's a statement, for sure.
But even with the title nailed down, he still needed a name for this new kind of science.
Right, a name for the whole field of study.
He tried everything, exploring word roots, even writing programs to generate potential names.
Always the computer scientist.
But ultimately, he decided to let the name emerge organically.
So no fancy Latin terms or Greek roots?
Nope. NKS just became the natural shorthand for a new kind of science.
And it's stuck.
It did.
Hmm.
And this idea of letting the process guide the outcome really echoes throughout the whole project.
It's like he's letting the science itself dictate how it should be presented.
Exactly. And speaking of the process, Wolfram initially thought this whole thing would take a year or two.
Oh, how naive.
But it ended up being over a decade of intense work.
Wow. So he went full hermit mode for this.
Pretty much. He dedicated evenings and nights to writing and research.
And we know this because
His email timestamps, he was basically nocturnal during those years.
classic workaholic burning the midnight oil.
But it wasn't a straight shot to the finish line. In 1996, he had to take a detour. What happened?
To complete Mathematica 3.0 and write its documentation.
Talk about multitasking.
It's amazing how all of his projects were interconnected.
Yeah, his work on Mathematica probably informed his research for the book and vice versa.
Absolutely. And throughout it all, he was constantly making new discoveries.
So the book was a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving.
Sections that were supposed to be quick notes turned into major research projects.
Always something new to explore.
And beyond the research itself, Wolfram was equally committed to placing his discoveries in historical context.
He wasn't just presenting his ideas in a vacuum.
Right, he wanted to connect his work to the broader scientific tradition.
And remember, this was pre-internet, so research meant mountains of physical books and papers.
Oh yeah, he amassed a huge library, nearly 5,000 books and over 7,000 papers.
I can't even imagine what his office looked like.
It must have been chaotic. And then there's the People Dates Project, which is hilarious.
What's that?
He wanted the book's index to include birth and death dates for every single person mentioned. Every single person.
All 484 of them.
Wow, talk about attention to detail.
He had to track down obscure records, contact living people to verify dates. It's crazy.
That's dedication to accuracy.
And the index itself became a massive undertaking.
I bet, with that many entries.
He had very specific ideas about how to create a user-friendly, index.
So not your typical dry academic index.
It was packed with synonyms, subdivisions, even a few humorous entries.
Sounds like a fun index to browse through.
And it ended up being 80 pages long.
No wonder it barely fit in the book.
Speaking of which, the publishing of the book is a whole other story.
Oh yeah, let's get into that.
It's a wild ride with some amusing anecdotes and insights into the publishing industry back then.
I'm all ears.
It all started when Wolfram started talking to traditional publishers.
Oh, sense.
But he quickly realized their priorities didn't align with his.
How so?
Their focus was on sales tactics and marketing strategies.
Not the science itself.
Exactly. There was even a suggestion to send textile cone shells to bookstores as a promotional item.
Textile cone shells. Seriously.
I kid you not. It was like they were trying to sell a product rather than groundbreaking scientific work.
Yeah, not really seeing the connection there.
And then the contract negotiations, that was a whole other ordeal.
What happened there?
It was a clash of cultures, the fast-paced tech world versus the slower, more traditional world of publishing.
Wolfram probably wasn't used to that kind of pace.
He even compared the publishing industry to a Victorian relic, resistant to change.
Ouch, that's a bit harsh.
But it shows how frustrating it was for him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it wasn't just about the business side either.
What else was there?
He had very specific ideas about the printing quality.
He wanted to make sure those computational images look their best.
Exactly. He wanted the book to be a showcase for the beauty and complexity of those images.
That makes sense, given his attention to detail.
But the publishers just didn't get it. They were stuck on using web printing.
Which wasn't good enough for Wolfram.
They even tried to pass off a sheet-fed print test as web printing.
Oh, come on, that's shady.
It was a classic case of misaligned priorities.
The publishers focused on cost, Wolfram focused on quality.
So he decided to go independent.
He took the leap.
Yep, created his own publishing imprint, Wolfram Media.
Bold move, but I guess it was the only way to get what he wanted.
And let me tell you, his standards were high. He went all out on achieving the best possible printing quality, testing halftones, paper weight, even the binding.
No detail was too small.
He researched the type of trees used to make the paper.
Eastern hemlock, if I remember correctly.
You got it. And he even had a specific vision for the end paper color. Goldenrod.
That's very specific.
He wanted every element to contribute to the aesthetic experience.
So it was a true labor of love.
Absolutely. But even with all this planning, the actual printing process turned into its own adventure.
Oh, I bet there were some stories there.
We'll get into those next time. Tales of proofreading, software glitches, even a collaborative effort to fix a bug.
Can't wait. So last time we left off with Wolfram, about to send this meticulously crafted book to the printers.
And with his insistence on top-notch quality to really do those images justice.
Oh yeah, he spared no effort when it came to the printing.
We're talking rigorous testing with different printing technologies.
Different paper types.
He wanted those black and white images and grayscale halftones to be incredibly sharp.
He was really pushing the limits for a scientific publication.
One technique he focused on was halftoning.
You know, where you create shades of gray using tiny black dots.
And he pushed for a very fine 175-line screen.
To get those crisp results.
He was after.
And then there's the paper itself.
He ended up choosing 50-pound Finch VHF paper.
Made from eastern hemlock trees.
It had the right balance of opacity and weight.
And longevity, too.
And he didn't stop there. He even had the book's binding tested.
To make sure it could withstand heavy use.
He was tumbling it thousands of times.
Talk about dedication.
He really thought of everything. And remember how he had that specific vision for the end paper color?
Oh yeah, goldenrod.
It just goes to show his holistic approach to design.
He wanted every little thing to contribute to the experience.
But even with all that planning, the printing process wasn't without its challenges.
Oh, what happened?
Well, first there was the page limit.
From the binding machines?
That final index, all 80 pages of it, barely fit under the 12,280-page maximum.
They really squeezed it in there.
And you know that goldenrod end paper he was so set on?
What about it?
Turns out that particular shade was prone to fading in sunlight.
Oh no, the printer warned him about that too.
But those are just minor hiccups compared to what came next.
Okay, this sounds serious.
Early proofs revealed a mysterious asymmetrical cellular automaton.
On one of the pages.
Page 157.
I can only imagine the panic.
Thankfully, it disappeared on the second proof.
A printing ghost.
But then a new problem popped up. A seam glitch on page 332.
Another glitch.
This one was a real head-scratcher.
What was causing it?
It turned out to be way more complex than anyone anticipated.
So what was the issue?
This glitch exposed how intricate image processing really is.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They started to suspect a bug in the RIP software,
RIP
the
software.
raster image processor.
Ah, got it.
The thing is, this wasn't just a simple printing error.
It was a software problem.
Wolfram ended up emailing CEOs and software engineers,
At different companies.
trying to get to the bottom of this bug.
Wow, a real collaborative effort.
In the end, they had to reprint the signatures with glitches.
I must have set them back.
And it turns out similar issues had popped up in other books.
What kind of books?
One's about half-toning algorithms.
Oh, the irony.
Adobe eventually provided a fix.
They make PostScript, right?
Yeah, but the exact cause of the bug remained a bit of a mystery.
A printing mystery for the ages.
But glitches aside, the first hand-bound copy finally arrived,
The moment of truth.
and Wolfram was ready to share his work with the world.
All those years of work finally paying off.
And pre-orders for the book were surging.
People were excited.
Now he had to figure out how to get the book printed.
Bound and
Well,
distributed.
these eager readers.
Talk about a logistical challenge.
It was a puzzle involving a paper mill in New York
A printer in Canada.
and a bindery, I think it was in Toronto.
Or was it Portland?
He couldn't quite recall.
So many moving pieces.
And of course, something had to go wrong.
Oh no. What now?
Several truckloads of books ended up getting lost at a distribution center.
Are you serious?
It's a miracle the book ever made it to anyone.
Talk about a wild ride.
And to think, all of this happened after he made the decision to self-publish in the first place.
Yeah, remember those early discussions with traditional publishers?
Not exactly a match made in heaven.
The focus was all wrong.
I just didn't get his vision for the book.
So Wolfram took matters into his own hands.
And years later, while looking back on the project, he stumbled upon something interesting.
What was that?
A lost epilogue he had written, but ultimately left out.
Like a deleted scene from a movie.
This epilogue gives us a glimpse into his thoughts about the future of NKS.
His predictions for technology, his ideas about education.
It's like a time capsule,
And what's amazing is how some of his predictions have actually come true.
like Wolfram Alpha,
A computational knowledge engine.
that relies heavily on NKS principles,
And then there's the concept of computational irreducibility,
which means that some systems are so complex
that you can't predict their behavior.
or simplify them.
And this idea has become relevant to things like Bitcoin.
And blockchain technology.
It's fascinating to see how NKS ideas are popping up everywhere.
But one area where Wolfram had particularly high hopes was education.
He saw NKS as a foundational part of computational thinking.
A way of approaching problems through a computational lens.
He believed it was essential for students in the 21st century
He thought learning about NKS could empower students to think differently
to solve complex problems.
and even make their own discoveries.
But as we mentioned before, this vision for NKS in education is still unfolding
New ideas, especially radical ones like NKS, take time to integrate.
into our education systems.
It's a slow process.
But it's exciting to see those seeds being planted.
Speaking of change, we mentioned that Wolfram decided against a second edition,
For a new kind of science.
even with all the advancements in technology.
And the growing influence of NKS.
Wolfram believes the original text still holds up,
He sees it as a snapshot of a specific moment.
a testament to the time of its discovery,
It's like a time capsule of ideas.
unfiltered by later interpretations or revisions.
There's a certain elegance to that.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what have we learned?
About the creation of a new kind of science.
Well, it's a story of dedication, attention to detail, and a willingness to challenge conventions.
Wolfram's pursuit of clarity really shines through.
It's a reminder that science isn't just about facts and equations.
It's a human endeavor, full of creativity and challenges.
We've seen how Wolfram's passion led to breakthroughs.
And personal anecdotes, even a few logistical nightmares.
It's been quite a journey.
And for those listening, we encourage you to explore a new kind of science for yourselves.
You might be surprised by what you discover,
Not just about science.
but about the nature of discovery itself.
And as you go about your day, we'll leave you with this thought.
What seemingly complex things in your own life might actually be governed by simple rules.
It's a question Wolfram encourages us to ponder.
And it might just lead you down your own path of exploration.
Stay tuned for the final part of our journey.
Welcome back to our final look at a new kind of science. We've gone through the research, the writing, the design, even the printing.
It's been a wild ride.
Now we get to see what Wolfram thought would happen after the book was released.
Right, we're diving into that lost epilogue where he shares his hopes for the future of NKS.
It's like a peek into his crystal ball, so what did he predict?
Well, one thing that stands out is his belief that NKS would change how we see complexity.
not just in science.
He thought it would impact everything: biology, economics, even the social sciences.
He saw complexity as a source of creativity, not something to be avoided.
Exactly, and he thought NKS gave us the tools to unlock the secrets of complex systems.
A pretty bold claim.
But, some of his other predictions were spot on,
Like Wolfram Alpha.
which uses NKS principles,
And the concept of computational irreducibility?
which has become relevant to things like Bitcoin.
So maybe he was onto something with this whole NKS thing.
And one area he was particularly passionate about was education.
He wanted NKS to be a core part of computational thinking.
A new way of thinking about problems,
He saw it as essential for students in the 21st century
giving them the tools to understand complex systems.
and make their own discoveries.
But, as we mentioned before, this vision for NKS in education is still a work in progress,
Yeah, integrating new ideas takes time.
especially radical ones like NKS.
But it's happening slowly but surely.
And it's exciting to see.
Speaking of change, we talked about how Wolfram decided against a second edition,
For a new kind of science.
even with all the advancements since its publication.
He feels the original text still stands on its own,
Like a time capsule of ideas.
preserved in their original form.
It's a testament to the time of its discovery.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what can we take away from all this?
Well, it's a story about the power of one person to make a difference.
Wolfram's dedication and attention to detail.
And his willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's inspiring, really.
It also reminds us that science isn't just about cold, hard facts.
It's a human endeavor, full of passion and creativity.
We've seen Wolfram's breakthroughs,
And his struggles.
the humor, the frustration, the sheer amount of work.
It's been a fascinating journey.
And we hope it's inspired you to explore a new kind of science for yourselves.
You might be surprised by what you find.
And as you go about your day, remember to look for those simple rules.
That might be governing the complex things in your life.
It's a question worth pondering.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.